When I first interviewed him, I was you're a little bit daunted. It's Jurgen Klopp. Of course you are, do you know what I mean? And like he bounced into the room. And what was brilliant about him was he didn't treat us, I didn't think at any point, the way he would have treated maybe media. So the way I'd seen him, so me being in that first press conference, the way he was with very much some of the media, I felt like when he was with the general media, the world media, when he first walked in, he was all very like kind and smiley and stuff like that. But I thought, with the others, he was a bit harder, and he was saying things like, what was the quote? I saw that when you were talking before. I was going to read out. He said something like, "Don't ask me daft questions. Don't ask silly questions. You won't get silly answers." Was one of the things he said. So that's like sort of, I'm stamping my ground here. And I thought, like, is he going to walk in when I interview him and say, "Don't ask silly questions. You won't get silly answers"? No, he just walked in and he was like dead relaxed, like shaking hands and like, sort of making you feel like really, and then there was no guidance from anyone. Like I think some people look at these things sometimes and think like it's all choreographed, stage managed, you won't ask this and you won't ask that and blah, 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 where all these mad conspiracy theories come from. There was none of that. We could have asked them anything. We handled it the best way we could. One, through being a little bit giddy that it was Jurgen Klopp. Two, thinking he might shout at us if we said, those, and three, a level of respect and wanting to get back in that room again one day.
Yeah.
But he was absolutely brilliant. And I remember him saying things like, there was what was that game? It was Burnley, wasn't it? Was it like New Year's Eve or New Year's Day or something like that? And it was a horrible game, and we got a last minute. Did we get a last minute equaliser or a last minute win? Can't remember now. Was it Clavan or Lovren or a combination of the two? Doesn't really matter anyway. My point is that when this game got mentioned, he was just like, Burnley, fucking, you know what I mean?
I know what one you mean. Yeah, it was Lovren onto Clavan, I think, and it was a 2-1 win.
That was it.
And it was like, because I remember him saying it was his favourite game.
Yeah. And it was like, and we just sort of naturally arrived at that. It was a dead natural conversation. He was, he was a warm fella, a nice fella, and there was none of that harder man that, he obviously felt he had to be with certain members of the press.
So what's interesting though, it ties into something we mentioned on the live show, which is, it's funny that he was clearly, and no wonder it wears you down after that, because it would do me. Like, he's coming to his first press conference saying to the press, "Don't ask me silly questions." And 6 years later, however many years it is now, what is it? 8? I don't know. However many years later, he's like, "Stop asking me silly questions." Yeah. Because you're doing me head in. And you're like, but where he's gone, when he meets fan media, he knows you're not just after a headline. You just want to chat to him and tell a story. Find out something different. Yeah. Which I think
thought that with him loads of times, to be honest, because, there were other moments where, I got into press conferences or got to ask him a question, or there were other, times where, we did interviews with him. And it was like he appreciated being able to have a chat about footy where it wasn't daft. Like, I remember, I think it was in Hong Kong, and at the time, we still had Coutinho, but he was being heavily linked with a move away. And it was like every single press conference, Coutinho. And he was literally like, "Don't ask me about Coutinho." And then the first question was about Coutinho. And obviously the journalist's argument is, I've got the desk saying to me, ask about Coutinho. Yeah. So I've got to ask, whether you want me to or not, I've got to ask it. We've got to be seen on camera saying, what about Coutinho? And so we asked about Coutinho. I remember there being some really bizarre question as well, where Coutinho was compared to butter or margarine or some wildness, or maybe that was Klopp's answer. But anyway, my point was that, so the mainstream done that, he wasn't happy because he'd said, "I don't want you to ask me about that." And then I said, because it was pre-season, because I've always wondered this, I said, you're the manager, you've got this squad, you flew out to the other side of the world, you're trying to prepare them for a Premier League season, you want to win the Premier League. What do you say to the players in terms of how hard or not how hard they go in a game? How would what do you get them to do? Does that happen naturally? Do you say to them, give 80%? Do you say to them, pull out of a tackle, which people always say not to do because you can get injured more by trying to do that? Do you know what I mean? And I sort of, explained why I wanted to know it and said, from a football fan point of view, I think it's intriguing to know, you know, the difference between a real game and a friendly, a game abroad, a game at home. You know, where are they in the prep? How do you and like, he gave this really detailed answer, but like with a big smile on his face, like he was dead happy talking about an interesting aspect of his job, and not just what about Coutinho?
Yeah,
what about Coutinho?
But isn't it funny? Like, and I think this is where, and again, because we live in a modern world now where fan media is this big thing, people forget it didn't exist. And I reckon for people like Klopp and players over the years, it's actually been refreshing, because you're being asked questions by people who are genuinely interested in hearing more about what you do for your job that they like watching, instead of like what's going on with the transfer, what's going on with this thing that you're not interested in. And like, you're like, that's just admin to me. I'm not bothered. So you can see how over the years they've developed an affinity to fan media, because it's like, yeah, sound lads, nice one for asking questions. Like, you see him do it now, don't you? Like, you will see, and as you say, they've all got a job to do and all the usual caveats and blah blah bullshit. But you'll see, like, Joe, the first 3 questions of a press conference will be nonsense, like something around
led by
it.
Sky, isn't it?
Yeah, it starts with Vinny, and then he'll get to the point where he goes, right. So anyway, let's talk about the game on Saturday. And the number of times Klopp goes, "Oh yeah, want to talk about the game? Do you?"
Yeah,
sound. There's a game of footy to talk about, is there? Sound. And you're like, you can see how it just annoys him every time.
I actually think it's a credit to the club. And look, I know, like I said before, there are varying views on it, conspiracy theories even, and things like that. But I think it's a credit to the club that they have embraced fan media to an extent, as much as they can do. There are rules and regulations behind the scenes which mean that even if fan media wanted to be as close to the club as some people think they are, they can't anyway, because of the Premier League's rules and regulations.